I want to talk about this because I think that this is something that's important to understand. Transgender people are 3 times as likely to go hungry, new census data shows. So I want to, a lot of people love to say, oh, well, I don't hate you because you're trans. I don't discriminate against you because you're trans. Therefore, I am not transphobic. And, government doesn't discriminate against that. Like, saying I hate trans people is not the only way to discriminate against trans people. In the same way that, you see these stories online where it's like, a black family was trying to sell their house and an appraisal was significantly lowballed. And then they, had, their white friends, put photos of their white family in the house. And then they got another appraisal and the price skyrocketed, right? A lot of these biases and discriminations are subconscious. People don't realize that, right? And what that produces is a society where, again, as we can see, transgender people are 3 times as likely to go hungry, new census data shows. It's not necessarily that someone says, oh, you're trans, therefore I'm not going to feed you, or I'm not going to employ you. Oh, you're trans, and therefore I'm going to... It's not always on a conscious level. These are unconscious, subconscious biases that produce these disproportionate things in society when it comes to trans people and other kinds of minorities. And we need to understand that, okay? So let's go in here. This is from December 31st. Transgender adults were 3 times as likely as cisgender people to experience food insecurity this year, according to new data analyzed by the Williams Institute of UCLA. The data, which collected by the Census Bureau's Household Pulse Survey between June and October 21, showed that more than a quarter of transgender adults in the United States reported sometimes or often not having enough to eat, compared with just 8% of cisgender adults. Trans people of color were especially vulnerable. Nearly 36% experienced food insecurity. And this is another problem I have with, the anti-trans discourse, especially with the recent Dave Chappelle garbage. Is Dave Chappelle in his special, one of the big, jokes, or one of the big, messages of a special is that white people are trans and gay, and that black people are really in, in a bad place in society. But that completely erases black trans people, black gay people, and just people of color that are in the trans and gay community and so forth. And that's another huge problem because, again, if you're trans and you're white, you're going to be in a better situation than if you're trans and you're black. That's just the way society is structured. White people are in a position of power by default in this society because we live in a structurally racist society where a lot of people, enough people to make an actual structural shift, are either subconsciously or unconsciously biased against black people or trans people, or just overtly biased against them, right? So again, I am a white trans person, so I know that I am getting a short end of a stick in society, but I am not getting the shortest end of the shortest stick in society, and that's why, again, I will use my position to advocate for rights of all people to, make sure that there is less racism in society, right? If I can help produce a society where, let's say, trans people and trans people of color have the same level of disproportionate food insecurity compared to cisgender people, that's still a win in my book. Now, obviously, I want to have a great equalization of society when it comes to this kind of stuff. But again, we need to fight all kinds of discrimination. And one of the things that is commonly just ignored entirely is that trans people are not a white thing. I don't know who created this fucking weird fan fiction where in their minds the only gay people and the only trans people in the world are white people. That's weird. That's never existed. It's never been like that. No one has ever suggested that that's a thing other than these weirdo comedians that people these weird philosophers that people want to think are funny. At the root of this, researchers say, is a web of discrimination that leaves trans Americans impoverished and unable to access food. Roughly 30% of trans people live in poverty, the Williams Institute has found. 30% of trans people live in poverty. That's fucking crazy. That's crazy. People are poor, and that's why they don't have enough food. Said, thank you for that. Wow, that is a profound... People are poor, and because they're poor, they don't have food. Wow, that's breaking news. But anyway, said Kirith J. Conran, research director of the Williams Institute and the co-author, along with Catherine O'Neill. On the new report of food insecurity, it's important to consider how stigma and discrimination impact economic resources across the life course. Again, if you are a cisgender, straight, white person, right, you are more likely, let's say, when applying for an apartment to get that apartment, when applying for a job to get that job, when asking for a raise to get that raise, when asking for a promotion or whatever to get that. You are more likely, and it's just, again, it's very difficult to quantify, right? So again, let's assume you're trying to find an apartment if you're trans, right? chances are it's going to take maybe 5 or 6 more tries, or, you know, like, I'm just making these numbers up, but you just for the sake of argument, right? Let's assume you're like just a cisgender white person. It might take you a couple times, right, to get an apartment, to get in and to move in. If you're trans, it might take you a couple more times. If you're black, it might take you a couple more times, right? Like and then that adds up over the course of all factors of society, right? And then again, not also to mention direct amounts of hate crimes, especially when trans women of color are the most brutalized disproportionately to like percentage of population in the society. We're seeing an epidemic, a pandemic even, of trans women of color being murdered in society, you know, and a lot of the times when people are arrested for these things, they'll say, oh, well, I thought they were a woman and they were a man, and so I beat the shit out of them and killed them. And then sometimes what that's referred to as the trans panic defense, right, which is a derivative of the gay panic defense, right, as well, where it's an actual legal phenomena where people throughout the history of this country have gotten away with murder because they said, oh, I panicked because I thought that they would give me the gay. People have literally murdered people, friends of theirs, when they found out that they were gay, and then went to court and said, oh, well, I panicked. It was temporary insanity. I panicked because I found out they were gay and they were going to give me AIDS or something, and I thought that they were going to gay me up or rape me because that's what gay people do, and so I killed them. All right, you're free. That's a phenomenon that's happened, and that has also happened with trans people. So again, it's not just direct discrimination, that it's subconscious and unconscious discrimination throughout all aspects of society. Right now, again, also factor in that trans people need more healthcare access, right? Like, for example, I am on hormones, which cost money, right? So it's like, if let's assume I'm in everything is the same boat with me and someone who is, you know, my health and all that, whatever. We're in the same boat as someone who's cis. Well, they are, like, let's say they don't have the bills of having to have hormones or having to do, like, blood work or whatever. I'm getting my blood done today, right? They don't have those bills. Then that means they're going to have, like, just that much money more in their accounts, and that's going to put them in, like, again, you need to understand, there are things in society that destabilize equality. And the idea that trans people are privileged, or like that they're, you know, oh, they're woke and therefore, like, you know, I don't even know what the arguments are. But again, like, this stuff is really important to understand. You can read this article. It goes more in depth on the study. But the basic principle is that most of these biases are unconscious, subconscious biases in society, and then there's a lot of other factors that leave trans people in the dust, especially trans people of color, and it's a huge problem in society. So the idea that anyone wants to say that trans people have equal rights in the society, they are wrong. In the same way, people who say that there's no such thing as racism or systemic racism in the society, they're wrong, right? They are objectively, factually, by every metric, wrong. And the sooner they realize that, and the sooner you realize that, the sooner we can actually fix these problems in society, because they are wrong, you are wrong, and we need to fix these problems.